What's a good word, everyone? It's your boy DKB here. I just want to say thanks for all the support. The channel's been steadily growing, and the number you see below, you can drop a text, shoot a voicemail, any ideas, topics, collabs, etc. you guys want to see. I'll include them in future videos and live streams, and I'll catch you again. Be easy. What's a good word, Jets fans? It's your boy DKB here. Let's talk about one of our recent draft picks and wide receiver, Arian Smith. He was a healthy scratch for our win against the Falcons in week 14 or week 13. Either way, it did raise some eyebrows, right? This is a player that has repeatedly been talked about, excuse me, as being part of the vision, having a role, there being a goal in mind that we're looking to achieve with Arian Smith. You think about some of the commentary around when we actually drafted him, and it was remarked that, he was valued or viewed to be a much later prospect than where we took him and things. And when you just try to kind of map out what the just X's and O's concepts of it all would have been, this was supposed to be Aaron Glenn and Tanner Engstrom's version of having a Jameson Williams, for example, within their offensive scheme. Now, we could stop everything right there, right? There's a significant problem with just that in and of itself, because many people view Jameson Williams to be much more talented as just a natural receiver than Arian Smith. And the only real kind of overlap there in terms of trait, skill sets, etc., was the fact that Arian Smith brought blazing speed to the field. We got a chance to see and hear about it all off season, but it hasn't really translated into regular season success, right? We're talking 6 catches for about 47 yards. He's been in on a handful of end arounds and jet sweeps, and none of that has really worked out in his favor, right? Defense have either been able to sniff it out pretty well, or he hasn't really been able to hit a lot of those to the edges. I don't know the number off the top of my head since I didn't look up the rushing totals, but let's just say if he's had 10 rushing attempts, 2 or 3 of those have been successful in terms of him being able to break it for, potentially, let's just say 8+ yards, right? I think 7+ was the mark that Aaron Glenn originally identified as what they consider an explosive in the ground game. So you're not talking high success rates. And I understand this year one is a rookie. When you think about the college aspects of what was going on with them, a lot of what I highlighted as well was him kind of being pulled between track and football, injury concerns, of course, and never really having a full commitment to developing himself as a football player. Again, one, partly due to health. Second, because he was a much better prospect as a track star, right? You're definitely talking Olympic capabilities here with Arian Smith, which is why I could see why the team would be highly sought after, right? Now, again, if you want to just boil it down to the fact that as of right now, this guy is really just a speed player, you could have collected that anywhere, right? I mean, just look at the UDFAs, for example. Quentin Skinner, tall, right? 6'4", 6'5"-ish, whatever the official measurables are. But someone else is running, sub 4'4", 4'4", or sub 4'4" speeds. So you can find this in the bigger packages and such. The only other calling card in Arian Smith's repertoire right now is really the fact that he's a plus run blocker for his size, which just happens to fit well with what we want to do in terms of the run game. But if it wasn't for this staff also trying to utilize him on special teams just to make sure that they can get him on the field, get him that experience, you're talking about a player that really is probably being relegated to being a healthy scratch more often than not during his rookie season. And it's not the end of the world here, right? This guy could take a huge leap next year. Route running could come out, look extremely pristine, crispy. He could go out there and make a ton of, contested catches. He could just be the same player that he was in the offseason, where he just always seems to create instant separation, much like kind of what we've seen out of Adonai Mitchell that really got us excited. And being in this wide receiver room where you're going to have someone like a John Mechie who's a little bit more in your physical archetype, having an Adonai Mitchell that has that speed element that can try to teach you some things about how he's leveraging that, and then having a Garrett Wilson who isn't your traditional route runner but can at least still, again, work through some techniques when it comes to improvising, when it comes to how he's operating out of his releases, when it comes to just being able to like, I guess, improvise the route running in and of itself to make sure that he's creating a big of an opportunity in terms of the separation as possible. There's a lot of guys from to learn from, a lot to be excited about, but you would love to see more of a secure role coming out of the first year, right? At this point, Kiki Mauigoa and Arian Smith and Tyler Barron is what I meant to say, are really the two standouts in this draft class in terms of huge question marks. And at least in Tyler Barron's case, there's some physical traits that you still like that aren't necessarily rare, but they're definitely not ones you just come across at normal for his position. So there's some stuff to like there as well. But again, we kind of also have that same stuff with guys like Eric Watts, for example. So in Arian Smith's case, it's a curious one because to address the healthy benching in and of itself, of course, Aaron Glenn didn't really give any insight other than it was spoken about with the player and kind of reinforcing the expectations, the standards, etc., etc. And this came during his press conference on 12/1, right, December 1st. So the only thing you can really take away from this is the fact that maybe this was disciplinarian, right? Which is what Rich Cimini essentially pointed out. And who knows what that is, right? It could be as simple as he came late to a practice. Aaron Glenn doesn't want to have any of that. It could be, maybe concerns about his usage, right? This is a guy that prior to the Adonai Mitchell, prior to the John Mechie trades, still wasn't getting a ton of run, and that's after Garrett Wilson also ended up getting injured, right? So for a guy that maybe feels like there's a huge opportunity in front of him and maybe he isn't being given the chance versus how the staff feels about him and potentially how pro ready he may be, maybe there could be some cause for concern there, right? But I'm not overly worried, right? If this was a huge issue on our hands here, you don't want to just outright cut a fourth round guy, right? He's still potential part of the solution going into 2026. But if he was going to be that much of a headache, you'd have to imagine it would have been more than just a conversation with Aaron Glenn. I'm not worried about the fact that it's a healthy scratch so much as this could be a player that you don't really see or hear too much more out of over the course of the rest of this season. One, Aaron Glenn potentially, wanting to highlight other guys. Again, Mason Taylor, Adonai Mitchell, John Mechie out there. But I don't know, man. It's kind of a toss-up, right? You hate to not see as many flashes, and really technically in Arian Smith cases, 0 flashes in his rookie year, and really expect that he's going to be a pivotal part of next season, where on paper, at least best case scenario, you're talking about him probably being wide receiver 5, right? If you have Garrett Wilson at your 1, Adonai Mitchell at your 2, John Mechie at your 3, let's say we spend a second round pick on a wide receiver as your 4, and then Arian Smith comes in at your 5, from a depth chart perspective, from a fan view, from just the optics of it all, that would probably be the ideal best case scenario, right? Arian Smith coming out as a gunner, having a couple packages for him where you're still trying to use him in sweeps and end around, and still also being able to bring him in for the occasional deep bomb opportunity. All that'll work out in his favor while probably playing, 10 to 15-ish snaps, right? If that, talking about being a wide receiver 5. But this is a guy that I still had a ton of faith in, right? I think for the most part, we haven't seen the hand issues, and a lot of that is lack of opportunity. A lot of that is also just he hasn't been on the field all that much in order to try to figure out just how comfortable we feel with that. I would say this, the fact that we haven't seen a ton of snaps out of him, though, still leads me to say that it's just more than the hands. It's just more than route running. It's kind of a totality of issues, and that we haven't necessarily seen him take these huge leaps in his development. And we have heard Aaron Glenn also kind of pump the brakes at, let's just say, on a monthly basis so far, as we've heard the rare question come up about Arian Smith and kind of how he's progressing. So I don't want to scratch him off as a guy that's, we spent a 4th round pick on, and he'll be relegated to being wide receiver 5 for the indefinite future, or a core special teams guy and nothing more than that. But But the future does look a little bit more gloomy for him, especially considering if we don't want to go the route of taking a quarterback early in the draft and you're talking about building up the supporting cast, it's going to just be easier and easier to find ways to want to push him down the board and try to force him out. And if he can create that competition, right? Maybe it's a him versus Mechie at 4 wide receiver 3 type thing. That'd be awesome. That'd be ideal. But we're not really going to see any I was going to say hardcore documentation. That's not it. But we're not going to see any concrete evidence of this until probably preseason, etc. Right? And there's still going to be a ton of questions about, well, he's doing it against vanilla defenses and backups and etc. etc. So we'll see ultimately if he ends up making it past the 53-man roster going into next year. But you have to imagine this is a little bit more of a letdown in the season where any weapon that we invested a draft pick on, you would have expected to be able to succeed in some facet, in some fashion. Now, final kind of thought processes here just around Arian Smith and the draft pick and everything as a whole. I got to go back through and see how all the rookies as a whole are performing, but you can at least make the argument that he's not just being outdone by leaps and bounds with some of the guys around him. Definitely still some misses for sure that are out there for more of the traditional wide receivers that maybe could have helped out instantly, that didn't quite fit the speedster archetype that Arian Smith was kind of pigeonholed into. But when I think about like DeAndre Thornton, for example, what's that the name? I know Thornton's the last name, but either way, it's not like he's been out there killing it with the Raiders, right? So that does give me at least some peace of mind to the very small degree that it's not like this was just absolute egregious pick. But let me know what you guys think. Could this benching end up being a sign of something more problematic? Can you potentially see Arian Smith working his way up to competing to be a wide receiver 3, maybe in the best case scenario? Or do you think this is a guy that we ultimately end up seeing flame out for us? And hopefully it's a huge learning lesson for Aaron Glenn and Darren Mucci to not just bet on the trade itself, but also have some confidence in at least some of the skill set that's coming into it, right? Instead of the potential overproduction type situation. But let me know what you guys think. I'll catch you guys again. Peace.